Welcome to the Understanding the Performance Assessment Project video. This video will take you through the steps of how to do the performance assessment project that is upcoming in the course. The draft of your rubrics, you're going to do two rubrics in this course, a teacher rubric and a student rubric, and the drafts of those rubrics are due on July 26th. The final project is due the following week on August 2nd. The project is worth 20% of your grade. Everything that you'll see in this video is available on the course site. For example, if you click on the Major Assignments folder, you will see all the instructions as well as this video. When you click on the Major Assignments folder, you'll see a folder for all the major assignments in the course. There's the quiz project. The next one down is the performance assessment project. Go ahead and click in that folder and you'll find all of the material we're going to be covering. Let's bring up the instructions for the assignment. As you can see, as I said, the draft of the rubrics due July 26th, that's a Tuesday as usual, and the final project is due August 2nd, worth 20% of your grade. It's important to note that this is the template for the project and you must complete your work on this template. If you don't use the template, it will be returned to you and you'll be asked to put it on the template. The reason for this is that I find that students miss portions of the assignment if they don't use the template directly. Or sometimes they'll put something and I can't understand what they're putting or what it's in reference to. So it's very important that you download this template and do your work directly on it. Step one is to review the standards in the standards folder that you've seen before in the course and select only one standard. This should be something that's in your grade level area of certification and your subject area. So for example, if you're teaching elementary school, you can select any of the elementary standards. If you're teaching high school social studies, select a high school social studies standard. Make sure your standard is second grade or higher. Just like for the quiz project, we don't want to be giving students rubrics to read when they're too little to read rubrics. So second grade standard or higher in the area of your certification. Please only choose one standard. Give the grade level of the standard and write the standard out in full. Don't just write the number. Next, you're going to develop a learning target that's aligned with the standard. Remember that a learning target is different than a learning objective because a learning target has a target for success. So a learning objective might be students will be able to multiply 2 digits by 2 digits. A learning target for that might be students will be able to multiply 2 digit by 2 digits with 80% accuracy. Step 3 is to develop the context. This is where you describe the setting for the performance assessment task. Where is it going to take place? What grade level? How many students? Are there any gifted students? Any students with IEPs or 504 plans? What subject? Answer these questions and you'll get full credit. What have the students been taught about so far and what might come next? Step 4 is to describe the lesson briefly. This should be a couple of paragraphs, but the important thing is that it be clear. In other words, the reader should be able to follow what's happening in the classroom. How will the learning objective be covered? You don't have to go into pages of details and write step by step as you might with a lesson plan, but just a summary of the lesson describing in a clear manner what happens. What does the teacher do? What does the student do? Step 5 is the performance task. So you've taught the lesson and now you want the students to do something to show you they have mastered the learning objective. Remember that a performance task is something that a student must do. So a test of selected response items is not a performance task. An essay is a performance task. You might use an essay. You might use students creating PowerPoints, writing poetry, solving math problems, but they must perform. Now, math problems are a little tricky. If it's just a simple math problem where they have to come up with an answer that's like one step, it's probably not a performance task. If it's a multi-step math problems where students have to show their work and it's something you can design a rubric around, that may be a performance task. So be careful when you're talking about math problems. The question to ask yourself is it sufficiently complex enough that it requires a rubric? If it's something that just has a yes/no answer, or it's something that's very simple, it may not require a rubric, probably not a performance task. So you're going to write a few paragraphs to describe the performance task. Remember, the performance task should be aligned with your standard, your learning target, and your lesson. Next, you're going to develop 2 rubrics. Now, the draft of these rubrics is actually due before the final project, and that's because you need to get feedback on these rubrics. But I would suggest just following in a sequential manner the steps and only submitting the rubrics for review. You can always go back and tweak the other steps. First, you're going to develop a teacher rubric used to score the performance task. You can develop a holistic or analytic rubric, but it would behoove you to go and read the justifications for each type of rubric in your textbook, because you're going to have to support them later in your paper with a citation from the textbook. Be sure that the rubric is well suited to the task and grade level, that the criteria listed on the rows and the levels of performance across the columns are appropriate and clear. Make sure that the criteria are well aligned with objectives and standards, that the descriptions of criteria are teachable, clear, identifiable, and measurable. There's a continuum between levels of performance that's clear and appropriate. So you don't want your exemplary level, for example, being the same as your adequate level. You want the rubric to be well aligned with the task. Now, here's an important point. Your rubric must be presented in a table, or points may be deducted. Next, you're going to develop a student rubric. Now, the student rubric matches exactly the teacher rubric, except it's written in kid-friendly language. It covers the same criteria, has the same levels, but in a kid-friendly language. For second or third grade, you might use emoticons showing happy faces or sad faces at the top for the descriptors. At the end, you're going to run a Flesch-Kincaid reading level on your student rubric only and enter the grade level here. So you don't have to do the readability analysis, but you have to do the grade level. And that grade level should be just like with the quiz project, plus or minus 1, excuse me, grade levels from your grade level for the lesson. The student rubric, again, is something you would hand students so they could see how the assignment, the performance task, was assessed. The 8th step is to write a justification for why you chose either holistic or analytic rubric. State which one it is, and then provide a citation from the textbook along with a matching reference to receive full credit. I chose a holistic rubric because according to the text, and then provide the reasons, the citation, and at the end put a reference. The reflection, just like with the quiz project, is what did you learn? What went well? What did not go well? What surprised you? What did you learn that you can take forward into your classroom? This should not be written as just a conclusion, which is a summary of your project, or you're going to lose points. You can see my rubric for grading your performance assessment project. I look to see if you have a standard written out, if your learning target is actually a learning target, and if it's aligned with your lesson and performance task in rubrics, whether you've described sufficiently the context for your lesson, whether you've described clearly your lessons, whether your performance task is a performance task and that I look to see that it matches and aligns with your learning target and your rubric. I look at the teacher rubric and I examine several things, whether you used appropriate criteria, whether the levels of performance were all set forth appropriately, whether it was aligned to the task. I look at your student rubric to see if it's clear and aligned with the teacher rubric and whether your grade levels were appropriate. I look at the justification for the type of teacher rubric that you used, and I look to see that you have a citation and a reference. And I look at your reflection to see evidence of learning. Finally, I look at your spelling, your grammar and professionalism in your paper, and your rubric presentation to make sure that it is presented in a table. Now, the last thing I'll tell you is that it's very important to review that sheet that says most common errors in rubrics, where I've identified 5 of the most common errors that beginning rubric writers make, so you can avoid those pitfalls. Any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you.